Madhu. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I've sent it to you, Gauri. Audience, all those who have joined the webinar, you are just being subjected to our logistics. I'm partially sorry for that, but also glad that you're joining us for this part of the session as well. A session is never, without logistics. And so just a few housekeeping for about 30, almost 40 attendees here. Your audio will be disabled, like I had mentioned in the email and also otherwise other places. But you can always type until we start the presentation and the discussion. The chat window will be open, it will be enabled, and you will be able to chat between yourselves as well as with the panelists. And we might at times disable the video because of bandwidth issues, if we see bandwidth issues. And what else? Any other housekeeping things? I don't think so. Raise hand feature doesn't really help, but I mean, I have not been able to figure out how to disable that. But once the session starts, we will disable the chat, so you can only send questions and panelists can see the questions and answer them. The panelists are basically Gauri and I, and we will not be typing out answers, but we have a team of facilitators who are aggregating questions. So some of them might answer a question, especially if it's logistics related. And if it's our topical, the answers are either going to be during the session or after the session in the post-session summaries that and reports that we share. So thank you for coming, and we'll wait for another few minutes. We still have 3 minutes to our scheduled time. And yeah, if you have any questions, even now you can type out. Not that we will not answer questions, but yeah, you can also type it out in the chat window.
Vijay, you'll let me know when to start recording?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. We have about 50 attendees so far. And I'm not checking on YouTube.
Yeah, 14 on YouTube.
Okay. So folks on YouTube, welcome. And we shall be taking or observing the chat window on YouTube as well. So there is a live chat that is possible on YouTube. So feel free to please type out your comments there. And once we are in the Q&A session, the moderator, so we have volunteers, we have facilitators in the session who shall be collating the questions from the YouTube as well as the Telegram channel and the Zoom session. So the moderator will have access to all the questions, and it's up to the, today Dr. Gauri has joined us as the moderator. So it's up to Dr. Gauri to choose which questions to take up for the discussion. So yeah, so that's housekeeping. We will start in a couple of minutes. Just give us a few more minutes so that we are in place. Okay. Could we also get a recording? Yes, of course. Okay. So let's start. It's 301, and thank you everyone for coming. Sabyada, if you are around, I would like you to do the honors of introducing the program and the
Should I record
audience.
this?
So good afternoon, friends. Welcome to all of you for the No Millets webinar. This is a series of 10 webinars to be organized by jointly by Revitalizing Rainfed Agriculture Network and the working group of millets of RRA Network, as well as the Millets Foundation. Three of us have joined together to actually work on this 10 webinars. This is the second of that series. And today's webinar will be focusing more on the value addition to the millet-based products, cooking characteristic, replacing paddy rice or wheat in the recipes, and etc. To begin the webinar, before that, I would like to say a couple of words regarding Revitalizing Rainfed Agriculture Network, which is known as RRA network in the country. And this network was started in the year 2007 by several organizations together in the country. The organization which used to work on the water set, they for a long time, like Wasan, SPS, AKRSP, and Pradhan, and most of these organizations who have been working on the water set, they came together to think on that. Along with the water set, what needs to be done next? So we all came up with a conclusion that while there is a lot of work is going on through the soil and water conservation work of the water set, it is also need to work on the production system, which the water set actually give a benefits to work a lot on the production system, and with the production system, how best we can link it to the enhancing livelihood, enhancing income of the farming community. So network is basically a platform. There are around more than 600 members in this network, and there are more than 300 civil society organizations are very active in this network. There are researchers, academicians, policymakers are part of this network, and there is a board also. There is a 7-member board which meets frequently, and in this network we have three operational wing. Primarily, one is that network hub, which is hosted at Wasan in Hyderabad, and my name is Sabyasachi Das, and I coordinate this network. And then along with the Wasan, there are several other organizations are part of it. Then we have working group, different thematic areas. We have working groups. Some of the states have their own RRA network, like in Maharashtra, it is Maharashtra RRA network. In Karnataka also, there is a group which is actually activating the Rainfed agenda in the Karnataka, that is Karnataka network. Then we have a network in Himachal Pradesh. We have a network in Bundelkhand and Rajasthan also. While we have been associated with a lot of organization in the different states, we have thematic working group, and millets is one of the thematic working group. This millets thematic working group is also coordinated and conveyed by Mr. Dinesh Balam, and this working group is hosted at Sahaja. It's is a Mysore-based organization. Krishna Prasad is one of our friends. Who, along with them, there are DG Guru, who is a founder of the Millets Foundation, And I would like to introduce the Millet Foundation and DG as a person who thinks about millets, who eat millets, who sleep millets. He is the person. So I'm really very happy to have DG in our working group of millets. There are several people in a working group of millets. Like I should acknowledge that Mr. Raman Ahuja, who is also consultant to FAO, is part of this. Dr. Ravindra Reddy, who is a former scientist at ICRISAT, is part of it. There are several other people. Director of IIMR has also agreed to be part of the working group. So it's a very experienced working group, and I'm really delighted as well as very grateful to my good friend Dviji and the Millet Foundation to actually take the responsibility of taking up this excellent work of the hosting this webinar and facilitating the webinar. Along with DG, I have another colleague, Gauri Rukam. She is also from Bangalore, and she is a holistic nutritionist, and she will also be the panelist of this session. And without taking too much time, I should request to DG and Gauri to take it over. And I wish all the best to all the participants. And I hope it will be an interesting. By the way, I am a little foodie, guys. So I always like, nowadays we are trying with the lockdown and all that. We're trying with millets and some of the millets recipes and this thing. So I'll be really looking forward to this. And now handing over it to DG and Gauri.
Thank you, Sabyada. Before I hand over the proceedings to Gauri Madam, Rahul, can you please put the slides on? I'm sorry, I should have told you earlier itself, but yeah. Gauri, it's over to you.
Yes, a very good afternoon and my respectful pranams to each one of you who have logged in for this beautiful program. I think we have done enough damage to our body, to our mind and ecology. And this particular time we have come together is such a wonderful phenomenon that the whole world is in the same time and in the same space. I think we can't get a better opportunity to correct ourselves in wherever we need to fix. And millets seem to be a beautiful answer, one of the answers for these problems. And let's, realign and rethink on many issues and listen to Dr. Dwiji for a lot of information of how to use these millets.
Thank you. Thank you, Gauri, Sabyada, and welcome to all the participants of the webinar. Can you hear me? Just confirming. I'm sorry, every now and then I'll have to do this because my network is a bit unstable. So in case you are not able to hear me, please let me know via the Q&A screen, or one of the panelists, if you can just give a shout out. Don't bother about interrupting, just interrupt. So am I audible? Am I clear? Okay. So I'll be talking about a few things today, but I think before I start talking about it, I want to just make sure that I'm upfront. I confess that I have used a bait and switch kind of thing. The value addition that I'm talking about is in terms of how to cook, not in terms of value added products. This buzzword of value added products has so much, it's going around so much that I felt tempted I have to use that in some way. So the value addition I'm talking about is in terms of how you will go about looking at millet based products, making millet based products, rather than giving you how to do value added products. So that's why the title, if you see, is about cooking characteristics and insights on millets dishes. And there was a slight variant of this in the messages that went out, but I can assure you that I'm going to stick to that theme quite strongly. So next slide, please. So the webinar series itself is, like Sabhyata mentioned, 10 in number. We have 10 episodes, and we are on the second one. And each of these will address different aspects of millets, and some aspects we have taken 2 or 3 sessions because of the expanse of the subject there, topics there. And I have used some lines in sand to delineate between, let's say, ecology and cultivation, or food and nutrition and things like that. So please bear with me if it feels like I'm stopping and saying that we'll continue in this session, but because at somewhere we have to draw these lines, and I have used my discretion on that. There is a slide number on each of them. So if you have a question about a particular slide, please note the slide number and quote that. And as you can see, the license on these slides are share alike attribution only, and you can do whatever you want with it, whether it is for commercial or non-commercial purpose. So feel free to use them with a similar license and with attribution. Okay, so now let's get to the talk today. Can we go to the next slide, please? So in this presentation, we are going to have a fairly bird's eye view in some sense, but also reasonably detailed in certain sense. I'm hoping that I'll be able to give it a reasonably detailed view as well on certain aspects. So the first thing that we look at is the nutrition and the grain structure, and why we need to look at this when it comes to millets. Then we look at some of the millet-based dishes using rice and grits and flours and fermentation. And then I want to bring in some insights which I really wish people who cook reconnected with, which is cultivation and its effects and processing and its effects, and then the summary. So it's supposed to be a 20-minute presentation, and I'll hopefully not exceed that. Can we go to the next slide, please? Apologies for this whole next slide business. It's just that my bandwidth is not very good. So one of my friends, Rahul, is hosting the video. So because of that, we have this, yeah. So if you look at the nutrition among the millet grains, it's not that one particular grain. So, okay, let me first explain this table. So what you see in the rows, foxtail, little, kodo, proso, barnyard, these are all different millets. And then what you see in the columns, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, minerals, etc., these are the different nutritional components. Now, I do not subscribe to looking at the individual nutritional components of different grains, but it does help to get an idea. And it is the way in which we can compare between different grains, and therefore we use that. So my apologies for the small size of this table over here. Like it was mentioned earlier, the presentation will be shared or has already been posted online and on the various groups. So you can just zoom in when you open that over there, and maybe even in Zoom, you can zoom in. I don't know about YouTube. So, but anyway, you will be able to see that. But what I want you to observe is the distribution of the green, highlights. It's not that it's only in one column or one row. It's fairly distributed throughout. And these are the high points, or within among the millets and among the grains that are there here. We've also included paddy, rice, wheat, and quinoa, or quinoa as some people pronounce it, in this table to just give you an idea of how along different nutritive components each of these grains compare. So there's a wide range of grains that are good. It's not just one grain that is good, but each one has its own beauty or nutritional benefits. But what I would like to stress is that there is a wide range of variability. So depending on foxtail millet has some, as far as I know, as in I've seen about 80 to 120 varieties of foxtail millet. And very easily there's a few thousand varieties just in India. So there's a wide range of variability in the nutritive value of these grains. because they are rain-fed crops. And that's the beauty of millets. These are rain-fed crops. They are not irrigated crops, and therefore these crops are much more hardy. We'll come to that later on. So depending on the variety, depending on the cultivation practices that were employed while growing these grains, and of course on the processing, the nutrition that you get is going to be different from the nutrition that you see in the chart. It might be on that packet itself, but that packet is for the sample that was sent for testing. It's not exactly what you see in your hand or what you have in your hand. So in one of the sessions, I think towards the end, we talk about assessing quality of grains and rice and other products. So in that, I shall be talking a little more about this, and even in today's session, I'll be talking. Let's go to the next slide. A little bit about the nutrition and how to assess nutrition. But before we go to assessing nutrition, let's try to understand the grain structure. So in terms of the grain structure, the outermost layer is the husk, which is hard in cellulose, which means that we cannot digest it. Ruminating animals like cows, buffaloes and goats to some extent, they can digest these grains. The husk, we cannot. So we have to take off the husk. The bran is the next layer inside. The germ is the point from which the seed will germinate. And that is one small dot at the bottom that we see in this schematic over here. And then the largest volume and mass is actually the rice kernel, which is where most of the all of the carbohydrate is, and which is the reason for us to be using this grain as our food. Let's go to the next one. So like I mentioned, we need to take off the bran. We need to take off the husk while retaining the bran. And the reason is that the bran is the layer in which we have most of the minerals, almost all the fibers, and almost all the fatty acids. But this is a thin and fragile layer, which is extremely hard to keep without losing or suffering some damage. So that is the challenge, and that is the reason why I was mentioning earlier on that processing is also important when it comes to what nutrition you will get. Because if the processing is not sensitive to retaining this bran layer, then we are essentially going to lose the nutritional value that bran brings in. Let's go to the next one. So let's get into the millet-based dishes, but before we get in there, we have to understand where do millets and millet-based foods survive, as in why do they survive? They survive in places where there is a mill like the one that you see in the photograph here. Mostly in poor, Adivasi or Dalit families. So as you can expect, our food history books or books on history where a lot of Pak Shastra and other things are discussed do not have good records of this, because millets were always the food of the poor, of the hardworking, of the toiling masses, as many say. So there are many stories and songs, and therefore you will see that with the British and the colonial and post-colonial literature, we start seeing records, we start seeing the instances of stories and songs with millets in it. And it's also there in our own reformist literature, which is like, for example, the दासर कीर्तनेगळल्लिदे कबीर के दोहे में है, मगर शास्त्रीय संगीत में नहीं मिलेगा हमें. You won't be able to get, not, I shouldn't say नहीं मिलेगा, बहुत कम मिलता है. So, and when we look at the people who ate and who have been eating these grains, recipes were not important for them. These were difficult lives, and they would cook something that they were very creative in their cooking, and they were very, ingenious in their cooking, using whatever ingredients they could get their hands on, and millets were available fairly easily for them. So that's the background on millet-based dishes history, and a little bit on that. We'll be talking a lot more on this in one of the other sessions. you can go to the website in order to get an idea of what are the other sessions and topics and other things, and sign up for those sessions as well. So now let's get into the cooking and the cooking characteristics and information that will help you in decide and build your own recipes. So water is the most important thing that we have to think of when looking at millets. And they don't need much water to grow millets, but they consume a much higher quantity of water when they're being cooked. And not just when they're being cooked, but let's say that you cook them with less water, you will observe that you're more thirsty after a millet-based meal if that grain was not, the grain's thirst was not fully quenched. So is that good or bad? It can cut both ways, and there are ways to deal with it. The most important thing that I mentioned to most people I'm talking to when talking about including millets in their diets is to start getting back in touch with your body and its signals. So you should be able to feel your thirst and act on it as well. A lot of people feel the thirst, just keep quiet and move on through the day and drink water in the evening. That does not work well for the body, and I'm sure Gauri would elaborate on that whenever she gets a chance to as well. So it requires a lot more water. So let's keep this in mind whenever we are talking of millets and millet-based dishes. Let's go to the next slide. So we'll look at some of the dishes, but more than that, let's look at the ingredients, because my interest in this session is not to make you an expert in or teach you 10 recipes. It's more about giving you ideas on what are the different ways in which we can use millets and why certain things work the way they do. So when it comes to recipes, there are a lot of dishes that we can prepare with millet-based, millets or millet-derived products, or millets in different forms is the right way to put it. Rice, grits. Grits is basically dalia or nucchu. In Kannada, we call it nucchu. In Hindi, it would be dalia. In English, we call it grits. You might have come across oat grits, barley grits, and grits, groats also sometimes people use. And then rava, our usual rava that we use for halwa or upma or other things. So you can get these millets also, foxtail, little kodo, proso, barnyard, round top, all these in these different forms. And you can make them, make dishes out of them. They're very similar to what we do with paddy rice or wheat. Again, grits or rava or the rice. The requirement of water is going to be different, and we'll come to this when it comes to when we are talking a little bit further on in the presentation about how we'll go about cooking rice for that matter. One thing we need to remember, these are smaller sized grains, which means that they do not require as much duration or pressure to cook. I'll repeat that again. In order to cook these grains, you do not need to keep your pressure cooker on for like 3 whistles, 5 whistles, whatever. In my regular pressure cooker, whether I use the Hawkins one or my Prestige one, we do not let it blow a whistle at all. We just build it up and turn it off and let it cool down, without forcing it to cool fast. We'll just let it cool down and the rice comes out beautifully cooked. I think I have a photo of that somewhere. We'll share that. I'll share that and comment on that. We have to remember that these are more thirsty. So we need to give it more water. As in, like I mentioned, easily 3, maybe even 4 times of 4 measures of water for 1 measure of rice. The reason I haven't put it on the slide is because it is variable. Depending on how the grain has been cultivated, depending on whether it's a new rice or an old rice, you will see that you will need to vary that water intake. Like the latest batch of millets that I'm using, it's only taking 2.5, at the most 3. Yesterday, my daughter was complaining that it's become very soggy. So not yesterday, a few days ago, but yeah. So we need to be careful because these are rain-fed crops. We can expect a lot of variation. That is the design. It's not an accident. It's not a flaw. That is the way the grain is, and that's the beauty of this grain, that a farmer doesn't need to put in the exact conditions that are required in order to grow them. It will grow according to the environment that it is in, with the water that it can get access to. People do invest a lot of resources in order to get better yields and irrigate their fields, and we'll come to that when we are talking about cultivation practices. I'm going a little ahead of myself there. So in terms of combinations, I love these combinations that I put in here, and I mean, each one has a different taste. I haven't put in dahi rice or daddojanam in Telugu with kodo millet. That's just amazing. So these are some combinations that I like, but feel free to explore. I like the whole grains. That's why I have put them as green gram and not green gram dal, and Bengal gram and not Bengal gram dal. Yeah. So Bengal gram is chana, green gram is moong. Hesaru matte kadle, and of course lemon and mango. Yeah, let's go to the next slide, please. How are we doing on time? Okay, I'll wrap up in the next. I'll speed up a little bit. So this is very important. Bran is a very thin and fragile layer. How do we know it's there in our rice or not? We will know because when we boil the rice, it's the thin layer that floats on top. It has fatty acids, which are basically oils, and it has fiber, so it's light, and oil floats on top of water. So you will see that when you boil rice or when you pressure cook rice, the scum-like layer on top, it's not scum, it's not bad, it's the most nutritious part of the grain, of your food, of your cereal dish. So I usually wipe down my pressure cooker in case I have, it has blown off and is sticking to the top, and put it back into the rice before I serve my rice. But what we have to remember, because we are talking about understanding these grains, and bran has an extremely different composition. Therefore, it has a very significant effect on cooking quality, on taste, and on texture. So I would like to, any of you who has used wheat flour, not the store-bought, but you take wheat, get it ground, and we typically tend to sieve it. So use that bran that you get from the wheat flour and cook it and see how it cooks. And you will see that the cooking quality is extremely different, taste is different, texture is different. It's very similar with millet bran as well. In fact, it's even, the delta is even more pronounced. So while bran has a lot of nutrition, we need to make a conscious decision whether we want to keep the bran in our recipe or not. And I would like to draw your attention to what we traditionally prepare in South Indian families, what we call as kajaya in Kannada and arisi in Telugu. I don't know the Tamil word. It's this wet rice flour. Rice is washed 2 or 3 times. Usually it's made with paddy rice, but you can make it with millet rice as well. You wash it 2 or 3 times so that you can get the bran layer off, then you dry it, and before it dries out fully, you ground it down to a flour, and then you mix in that wet state, you mix in jaggery, syrup of jaggery, and you let that rice flour sit in that jaggery syrup for a few days. And you, of course, top it off with some oil so that it doesn't develop fungus. And what we are doing there is essentially taking out the bran layer by washing it 2 or 3 times. So even with millet rice, you can try some of these things. And I'm just giving that as an example of where we will be using the, not using the bran. So let's go to the next one. I need to really speed up. We can do a lot of things with millets, and the first few were the husked millets, which have a husk like paddy. These are from the naked grains, ragi, jowar, bajra. Now, what we see is that the flour for especially jowar and bajra, it's not kept for too long because it goes rancid. Kadwahat aa jata hai usme. So it goes kahi baratte, ched vachestunde. So that rancidity is because of the fatty acids in the grain. So that is why a stone ground flour is any day better than a regular mill ground flour, because in a regular mill it becomes very hot. Again, processing. So we therefore see that bajra is typically used, at least nowadays, has become a very seasonal food, especially in the north. But it's very interesting that in the south, let's go to the next slide, we actually have bajra being used throughout the year. Especially if you go to Tamil Nadu, you will find these kul vandi. So these are basically push carts with pots, earthen pots, with different porridge in them. It's basically sour porridge. Sour porridge is basically porridge made in the previous day, thin porridge, and you mix some culture, dahi or majge, buttermilk or yogurt, and you make it sour, and you serve it in the morning. And what you see in the photograph here is basically idli. It's not cool. I'm sorry about that. I didn't have a good photograph of cool. But it's this kannadadalli ನಾವು ಅಂಬ್ಲಿ ಅಂತೀವಿ. ಗಂಜಿ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಗಂಜಿ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಮಾಡಿರೋದು, ಅಂಬ್ಲಿ ಹುಳಿ ಬರ್ಸಿರೋದು. So the souring process in millets, and this is with foxtail millet. The idli is with foxtail millet. So we do sour or ferment, culture our batters as well, and that changes the nature of the grain, of the nutrition that is available. And actually, even though these do not have gluten as an additive, if you use millets in your breads, they make amazing sourdoughs, beautiful taste. But see the above points and be careful when you're making your sourdough, because you can actually catch it at a very bad point and it will be quite bitter, and this bread will be rejected by anyone and everyone. Let's go to the next one. So when we look at different grains, why is it that we look, I'm stressing again and again on this whole aspect of variety and variability in process or in cooking quality. The reason is that we don't grow the same way. This is a photograph from Kadri. Kadri is in Anantapur district, a little 200 kilometers from Bangalore. And you can see the biodiversity here. There's groundnuts on the floor, close to the ground, and there are lines of foxtail millet. And in between, what you don't see very well in this, because it was not a very good season, are actually pigeon pea or togri in the lines. So when you grow it in such conditions, you're not going to get the same as when it is grown in a monocrop. And it is good to grow in this agrobiodiverse ways, because it sustains an ecosystem. It reduces the farmer's risk, and it also makes the whole cropping community-centric rather than individual or market-centric. And we encourage this a lot. So irrigated monocrops will give you higher yields, reduce risk, dependency increases. Sorry, it doesn't reduce the risk. The risk and dependency increases, and it makes the whole economy market-centric. And we all know how the markets behave. Nobody sets the market's prices. It's not the producer, it's not the consumer. So we essentially give our hands away to the market forces. And that's why we always promote the first option here, which is rain-fed multi-cropping rather than irrigated monocropping. And therefore, depending on the season, depending on the crops that the farmer grew it with, we invariably have variations in our grains and changes in our cooking quality. So as a conscious, sustainability-driven cook or a chef, we should be striving to accommodate these variations rather than insisting that I need my rice exactly like this. It should exactly take 2 glasses of water for 1 glass of rice. I mean, it does not. In order to achieve that, in order to make that chef's life easy, a lot of effort will go and a lot of resources will go. It is completely unfair and unjust to ask that of anybody. And that's why I keep telling anybody who eats my meals would know by now that I never try to recreate a dish. It will never be the same. The cook is never in the same frame of mind. The ingredients are never the same. The environment is never the same. So anyway, let's go on. Next slide, please. Processing, I have already mentioned a few of these. I'm running out of time, so I'll just let you guys read it later. What you see is a beautiful hand-processed kodo millet, which is not yet been cleaned. The reason I put that photograph is that when you hand process it, you really need to look close in order to identify whether it is actually rice or grain. Let's go to the next slide. This is what I love about millet rice. It can come out fluffy and grainy, as you see in this photograph. It was pressure cooked, and I just loved the texture and all that. I took a snap before we ate it all up. So I have just presented the historical context of millet foods, millet-based foods, given some idea of how we need awareness at each and every step of the supply chain, whether it is in production, handling, storage, processing, all these, and why it is important for us to understand the recipe, whether we want to keep the bran or not keep the bran, whether we want to use the grits or we want to use the rava, stuff like that. And of course, I always stress that please experiment. That's when you really hit gold. And don't try to hit gold again and again, because we need other things other than gold also. Thank you. And it's last slide, please. I mean, it's just for more information. I would like to acknowledge that a lot of these things about cooking, I have learned over my 30 plus years in the kitchen from various women, and almost invariably women, and my deep gratitude for that. And my mother, some of my friends, my wife to some extent, not too much, but I have learned some things from her in the kitchen as well. And also to a lot of friends. Kalyani is one whose name stands out in Kadri, Earth 360, that I have learned a lot about from when talking to and cooking with them. So that's my presentation for today, and I would welcome questions and of course hand it over to Gauri to share her thoughts and moderate the Q&A. Just a housekeeping thing. So your microphones are all muted. This is in a webinar mode. So please type out your questions and feel free to do so, whether you're on Zoom or on YouTube. We have volunteers who are going to collate the questions and share it with the moderator. And yeah, so that's all. It's over to you, Gauri. Thank you.
Yes, Viji, that was a wonderful, very crisp, very apt, and a brief session. I'm so glad, like most of the presentations will be the speaker orientation, but you have given equal amount of time for the people to ask their questions and clarify their doubts. That's wonderful. I'm going to go on to the questions right away. One of the first interesting questions I see here is from Ritu, and she says, has there been any study which conveys some information about the impact of nutritive value of millets as a result of medium of cooking, temperature, and pressure? I know you have covered a few points, but it'll be nice for you to go in detail about this particular question.
Yes. So just before we go there, Rahul, can you please go back to the summary slide? Yeah, I just love that photograph. As far as I know, there hasn't been, and there have been some studies, but not like a comprehensive study. But I have my, what do you say, axe to grind when it comes to such things as looking at effect of these things on nutritional value, because we are never in an ideal condition, and invariably when we try to measure these things, we have to do it in reproducible ways, and reproducible is typically ideal. So what is important for us to recognize is the broad indicators. Like if I don't have that scum layer on my, what is typically called as a scum layer, but is actually the most nutritious layer, if I don't have it when I'm cooking my rice, I know I don't have bran. I don't need to look at the nutritional chart.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? So that is what I would like people to recognize, that when we are looking at food and nutrition, let's try to own our nutrition. Let's not go by labels. Labels are useful to make some choices. I'm not denying that. And they are necessary. There should be truthful labeling, especially truthful labeling is very important. But let's not get too stuck up on what the chart says. Because like I said in one of those slides, what the chart says is not what is there in your dish. So my stress is always on understanding and getting these small, like for example, another metric I use, the drumstick I buy from a store, after I have eaten, if I put that in my waste pit, it takes some 4 or 5 days before fungal growth starts. Whereas if I use my mother's house's drumstick, within the next morning, there will be a bush of fungus on it.
Amazing.
What does that say? It says that the nutrition available in this is far
Much
more. Because see, we have come just in like the past, what, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 years at the most, we as humans. But fungi, bacteria, microorganisms, worms, insects, these have been around for millennia. So let's be smart. Let's just use these indicators. Try this with mango. This is mango season. Take a mango, eat it up, keep the pit exposed to air, with some wetness on it, like don't suck it dry fully. And observe what happens when you get it from a store and you get it from a farm which who has not used any chemicals and has cultivated it in a sensitive way. And you will know the effect. So I would strongly encourage people to look at these aspects rather than the tests.
Very well said, Dwiji. As a holistic nutritionist, I really, really appreciate your statements, because we seem to be in an era where we are always looking at superfoods and specific nutrients, which is a very, very wrong idea. We have to look at foods as whole and not break them up into their components. So I'm so glad that you explained it so beautifully. And going to the next question, one second. It says, is it better to slow cook, or should we use fast cooking methods like pressure cooking?
Very good question, very important question. Is it better to slow cook? I think it is. I think it is better to slow cook. I am not. There is a little bit of hesitation in sharing this because I feel life is a compromise, and food to even more of a compromise. I mean, between fast cooking and junk food or restaurant food, I would say fast cooking is any day better than restaurant food.
Yeah.
Right? But between between fast cooked food and slow cooked food, I would say slow cooked food is better.
Yeah.
But at the same time, let's do recognize that food is not just a woman's job. Even today, even with all the gender equality that we think we have, I don't think we have, but we think we have in society, we are extremely unequal when it comes to labor, domestic labor. So I feel if it's more convenient for the woman to cook in a pressure cooker, or for the man also, whoever is cooking, to use a pressure cooker rather than go out and eat, please use a pressure cooker any day. I myself use pressure cookers. I am not going to hide that. But there are certain dishes that I want to boil for half an hour, 45 minutes, because that is when you get that taste. That is when
Flavors.
you get, flavor, correct. So, so based on that, I mean, if you are cooking a feast, let's say, if I am cooking a feast, I do tend to, open cook and slow cook. But at the same time, I do boil my water before I add it to my dish. Because even when I'm doing open cooking, I'm not like going to put everything together and let it come to a boil slowly. So I do use some shortcuts which a lot of slow cooking advocates don't like. So I do think it's a compromise. So based on, so I keep telling this again and again, and you might have heard this earlier from me, or you might hear it multiple times today also. Food is not a one-time decision. Please don't treat food as एक बार मैंने decide कर दिया तो ऐसे ही करूँगा. ಒಂದ್ಸಲ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಾನು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡಿ, ಆ ತರ ಅನ್ಕೋಬಿಡಿ. ಊಟದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಪ್ರತಿ ಸಲಾನೂ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. We have to think about food every time we are cooking, every time we are eating. So make your compromises according to your reality. It's not the end of life. At the most, you will have an upset stomach. Let's say you mess up with your recipe. At the most, you will have an upset stomach and maybe angry family for a day or two. But those are the spice in life, I feel.
Very true. Thank you so much for that answer. I'm sure all the women out there will love you for that. And it was very well said. It finally boils down to our practicality. If I have to work, if I have to go out, if I have to cook, then I have to look at what best I can do. And it depends on every meal, as you rightly said. And the next question comes from Purvita. She says, what's the basic difference between the paddy rice and the millet rice? Is rice and wheat also a millet?
Yes. Beautiful question. Very important question. I'm sorry. I should have spent at least a few seconds on this in my presentation. Millets are from the same family as in the botanical family, as paddy rice, wheat, barley, oats. All these are from the grasses family, what we call as the Poaceae family. Now, that doesn't mean they're all the same. Each one is different, has a different characteristic. Rahul, if we can go to one of the early slides, I think it's 3, where we have the 4, maybe, the nutritional table. So each one has its own nutritional value. I'm just asking you to put the nutritional table because I have it there. If you look at the grain structure, if you look at the rice structure, the colors, there's so many different variations. So millets are much more, what do you say? Primitive in some sense, much more natural, much less developed by humans, as in motivated humans. Even there, I need to put a qualifier because millets have been developed by humans for a long, long time, but it's just that there have been millions of people working on this, developing for their own farms, and therefore there are those many different varieties. Whereas with paddy and wheat, which were invariably the food of the rich and the powerful, who wanted to create their environment, their food, everything according to their taste, because they could, right? They had the power, they had the money, they had the slaves, they had the cooks, all those things. So invariably wheat and rice, paddy rice, has seen a lot more motivated development when compared to millets. So that's why even I'm not even talking of the recent agriculture university seed development. We have Rajmudi rice, which was basically a variety of rice that was developed for the royal family of Mysore. Or we have Basmati, which is that long grained rice which used to grow in certain conditions only, but now grows in various conditions. But still, even today, the Basmati that comes from Kashmir has a very different value when compared to the Basmati that I can get from either Haryana, UP, or I can even get Basmati from Karnataka nowadays. But anyway, beside the point, but each variety of rice, each variety of millet rice has a different taste, has a different flavor. So it's not just that the millets are different. Within each millet, each variety is different. So that's why I keep telling that when we look at these grains, we really need to keep it in that context and not expect that the foxtail millet that I got, let's say in the last batch from the same supplier, from the same processor, will be the same as this batch or the next batch. Variations are expected and there is nothing wrong in that. That is the beauty of these things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And the second part of our question is rice and wheat also a millet?
No, see, millets are not really a definite thing. It's a loosely defined set of grains. So let's not get too hung up on that. And that's why I keep stressing on this aspect of different varieties within each millet. So I like our, the regional languages that we have. In Kannada, we call it Navane. We don't call it Navane millet or Navane something. That is Navane. This is Same. This is Aka. This is So like this, there are definite names because each one is a thing in itself. This whole millet thing comes from I won't put it on the British, but it is the British who documented it. They called them as coarse cereals and fine cereals. The fine cereals were basically wheat and paddy. The coarse cereals were everything else. So even maize, barley, oats, all these things went under coarse cereal. And of course, all the millets. So this was literally translated to mote anaj in Hindi. And Kannadadalli it is a translation, that word is slipping my mind. But recently that some of us people who have been promoting millets, who have pushed for Siridhanya instead of, the other word, that's slipping my mind. Anyway, yeah. So they are not millets, but there's nothing sanctimonious about the word millets.
Okay, wonderful. And yes, the other question is, can we open boil the millets instead of pressure cooking? I think you have answered that. And another interesting question is, was it consumed only by the higher caste people?
What? Millets? Millets was the food of the lower caste.
Lower caste.
I mean,
was it also consumed by higher caste earlier?
Yes, it was. See, it was not that it was not eaten by other people of other castes. The Dalits and the Adivasis cultivated. So the way I have understood history, and I have read a reasonable number of it and interacted with a lot of people working on food and food history and anthropology, we have very clear records where the farmers grew paddy and millets in different fields, depending on the field and the resources, for the landlords. And the landlord would give them, even the farmers who worked on the paddy fields would not get the rice that they grew as part of their wages. They would get the millet grains as their wages.
Probably they got more healthier, if you ask me.
Yes, but at the same time, there is a class and caste to it. Let us not shy away from that. History is all I'm saying. But that doesn't mean they didn't eat millets. We have, I come from mixed caste, but both my sides are reasonably higher caste families. And there is history of ragi in almost every household in South India, Karnataka. And we know that even the royal family ate ragi mudde for that matter.
Yes.
Ragi mudde kodai saru is like the standard in any agrarian community. So kal saru, not kodai saru, kal saru. Kalu means the chicken leg. But anyway.
Even kal saru will do for us vegetarians.
Kalu
we eat
will also do,
kalu
but,
saru.
But it's typically the kalu, not the kalu, which is kalu. Folks who don't know Kannada is basically pulses.
Yeah.
Kalu is leg, like a chicken leg, drumsticks as they call it in English. The US guys call it drumsticks. So anyway, millets were consumed by other castes too, but not as much. It was always the food of the poor. So especially in my mother's side, even though they are from an upper caste family, they grew up in a very difficult situation, and they say that they used to grow a lot of millets and eat them when they were younger. So they were a big family with very small, limited means, and so it's not that the food has never been exclusive, and that's what I keep telling people, that this whole thing that Brahmins don't eat this, or we don't eat this on these dates. Just talk to 10 different families of the same caste, and you'll get at least 5 different versions of the same thing. Right? So let's not get too stuck up on these things. Be a little adventurous. Food is not a lifetime decision. At the most, it will stay in your body for a few days, and then you'll be off of it and you'll recover from it.
Yeah. The next question is from Swapan. She asks, can it be explained again how to remove the bran at home? First, I think you should explain that whether it should be removed or not, and then answer her question.
We cannot remove the husk. So the undigestible part of the grain, which is the husk.
She's talking about the bran.
Correct. So I'm just starting from there itself. So what we do want to remove is the husk. So a lot of traders who started selling millets started selling them as grains, not as rice. And then they would be like, oh, you can wash it off and it will go. And a lot of people unfortunately face that. So I'm not sure if the question comes from there. So the husk is what we want to take off, not the bran. The bran, Rahul, can you please go back to that slide where we have the grain structure with the husk removed and the schematic? I think it's slide number 5. Anyway, I won't wait for that because we are running out of time. So the husk is what we want to take out. The bran we want to keep. And when we say we want to keep the bran, the reason is that that is where most of the nutrition in the grain is. See, most of our lifestyle diseases today have been traced back to our increased paddy, rice, and wheat consumption as compared to other food groups. Now, in order to balance that, a lot of people are going to millets. But what we are not realizing is that when you rid yourself or when you rid your rice of that bran layer, when it comes in that super white state, it has lost all its nutrition. Not all, but a good part of its nutrition, because other than the fatty acids, the carbohydrates, we want those fatty acids, we want those fibers, we want those minerals. I'll be talking a little more about this in one of the other sessions, not one, 2 other sessions. But we need to remember that bran is why we are shifting to millets. And if you attended the previous session, it was all, the central argument was that we need to retain the bran. Therefore, we need to overhaul our supply chain. Because for me, the whole idea of food and nutrition comes, and of course, working on farm and farming comes from the fact of food systems, sustainability, and equity. So, so from that perspective, we really want to keep the bran. Now, suppose you still want to take off the bran, because like I was saying, if you want to make kajaya with, barnyard millet, which will come out amazing, but it needs some experimenting. So please don't do big batches, do small batches. It won't be the same proportion all the time. Again, another warning, because it's rain-fed crops. So please remember that too. So what I'm trying to say here is that in case you want to remove the bran, you just need to soak it for about 10 minutes, maybe half an hour, and then just just wash it with a lot of what do you call this? Washing.
You use all your energy,
yeah, and it comes out quite easily. All that I request is please don't drop that down the drain, because that water is extremely nutritious. So if you have any cows in your neighborhood, give it to the cows, or if you don't, at least water your plants with that, because even the plants can do with that nutrition. So just wash it aggressively, and a couple of times if you need to, and it will become much lighter in color, whiter in color, and that's when you know your bran is pretty much taken.
So basically you said soak and wash well by rubbing it properly so that it gets separated. And ideally, we should not be separating them. Right. The next question is, to cook rice, do I need pre-soaking? In case the millet gets soggy while cooking, can I remove the extra water and drain it off?
Yeah. You can soak it, but you don't need to soak it. I do not soak my millet rice before I cook it. I wash my rice. It takes me about 2-3 minutes to get the stove and everything else in place, and then I transfer it into the cooker and cook it. So that's the only soaking that it seeks. And many a time I use boiling water in order to start my cooking, so it spends very little time on the stove. And I turn off the stove, go back to my work, and come back after 15 minutes and eat. So, yeah, I mean, it's not necessary to soak. Now, should I drain if there is excess water? Yes, you could drain it if there is excess water and you don't like it soggy, but the damage is already done. Again, when you drain it, please don't throw it. It's extremely nutritious. Mix it with your buttermilk and drink it up. It's amazing drink. You will, if you are the kind who doesn't like to have a heavy dinner, the morning lunch when you're cooking your rice, cook it with extra water, and especially open cooking, not pressure cooking, open cooking. You strain it out, the water, kannadal basiyadu antive. That wash water or the cooking water, you just add some buttermilk and have it at night for your dinner, the excess water, and also have your rice dry and fluffy. But I typically do not drain it. I identify after one or two trials how much water is needed for this batch. And like you can see in this summary slide photograph, that's pressure cooked kodo millet rice.
Wonderful. Probably we can take a couple more questions, Vijay.
Just one more, I would say, and
Yeah.
then we will.
So yeah, the next question from Monica. She asks, people with weak stomachs or digestive system, how will they be able to digest different millets, or it has to be a trial and error, or do you have any solutions for that?
Very good question, Monica. If I got the name right, apologies.
Yes, Monica, right.
So it's a very good question. And I experienced this firsthand with my mother-in-law. She had an extremely sensitive digestive system, and for her, we would boil the paddy rice. And this would be the bleached or the brand removed, what is typically called polished. I refer to it as bleached because it's done to look white. So the bleached paddy rice would need to be boiled extra long for her before she could digest it. But if I did the same with the millet rice, she could eat it. So with some millet rice, not all of them. Some of them she could digest, some of them she couldn't. And a lot of people have come up and shared their experience that whatever I have tried, I have not been able to consume millet rice as much as I have been. I am not comfortable. So what I suggest in such cases is trying fermentation. Fermentation changes the structure of the proteins, or even sprouting for that matter, but fermentation is much easier. And traditionally, we see fermented drinks of millets, like the kool I was talking about earlier. The kool is a standard fare in Tamil Nadu. In the peak summer, they drink kambu kool, which is basically bajre ki lapsi. And if you go to the north, they will say, "Arey, bajra to bahut garam hai, sirf sardiyon mein, jaadon mein khana chahiye." But then if you dig deeper, if you keep talking to the older people, they'll say, "Arey, apne yahan to hame bajre wali lapsi hum roz peete the. Garmiyon mein bhi peete the." Because the lapsi that they're talking about is the sard, the cultured one. So the idea of consuming millets should not be limited to one form or one dish. You try to do it in different forms. If you can't make it if you're not able to digest it as rice, try culturing it. If that doesn't work, maybe try using it with yeast, as a bread, additive to bread. Try different things. By bread, I don't just mean the Western bread, but you could make your like what do you call that? The sourdough ka jo flatbread banate hain na, naan. So you can have some millet flour in your naan, and that will give you the additional nutrition which you wouldn't get otherwise.
Right. Wonderful. But I don't want to miss this couple of questions, Dwiji. One is, I think maybe you can answer it very briefly. One is from Dr. Komal. She's saying, today ready-made branded millet flours are available in combination, 5, 6 millets in combination flours. Is it good, is her question.
It's not good for the ecosystem. Let me put it that way.
Nor is it good for the human system. I would definitely want to add that.
Yeah, as a food system, I don't think it is something that we should be encouraging for a couple of reasons. One is that, look, you can't have everything. I believe in limitations and living and making the best of resources that we have. And when we don't have everything at our disposal, we find ways to be, apply our mind, apply our talent to make it better. We have put 9 different things and it is now the best of what you can get. I don't believe in that. You don't get the best of everything. But having said that, if my choice is maida versus this, I would say this. This being, multi-millet flour versus maida, I would say multi-millet flour, no second thoughts. But if you have whole wheat flour, or you can buy wheat and get it ground in your neighborhood. And even today, even in Bangalore, even in the richest of neighborhoods, I have seen even in Koramangala, there are flour mills.
Absolutely, yes.
Right? Or Electronic City also there are flour mills. You just have to step out of your comfort zone and go explore your neighborhood, and you will find a flour mill somewhere. It might be 5 kilometers away, but still that in a city, that's neighborhood. So find your neighborhood flour mill, go get your grains, ground it, come home, sieve it, take out the bran, use it as a additive in certain dishes to improve your nutritional thing, and use the flour. That any day is better. So if you can get only 1 kg of different things and get it ground, that's also fine. But having said that, I do want to underline that millets are not conducive for typical grinding or milling, because they have a lot of oil content, and in the milling process it becomes very hot and oxidizes very quickly and becomes rancid very quickly. So most millet flours that we find in the marketplace, they either take off the bran layer and therefore you're denied the nutritional content, or if the bran layer is retained, it becomes bitter very quickly. In many cases, it's become bitter in the packet itself, even before.
Correct.
So that's my take, multiple takes on millet-based flours. And I think we should wrap up
Yes.
with your closing remarks, please.
Definitely. And don't get disappointed. He will definitely get back to all the questions and will be answered online, even though we did not have time to discuss all of them. So just to summarize what Dwiji basically said through the whole discussion, I know some of you couldn't connect and we had all these issues. Basically, what he means is that the cooking characteristics are different based on the way it is cultivated. And this is the beauty of these grains. And so we cannot fix the nutritional content of each of these. And we have to not look at these grains from that point of view. And the variability in these millets are very, very natural. And that is why the way of cooking or the amount of water will change a bit at every time you buy, and you can't crib about that. You should be happy about getting different nutrients into your system. And also, depending on the structure of the grain, ideally, he says, always retain the bran, because it is the bran which has the fiber, it is the bran which has the nutrients, and that's how they become healthful. The minute you remove the bran, then probably you can use them occasionally to make kajaya or the things of that kind. But on an everyday basis, it's important to keep the bran on. And the processing, the way you cook, the way you use them at home, all makes the difference. So it is important to ensure you buy the right source. Just like you have the unpolished rice and the polished rice, the millets also can be polished and unpolished. That is the bran removed. So buy from the right sources and cook the way you want. It all depends on the practicality, and also what he basically, I think he spoke about the combinations, and different combinations work best. Of course, again, it is individualistic. He has shared what he likes and appreciates best. They are available on the slides. And he said the stone grounded version of the flour is one of the ideal things. And fermented dishes could be very delicious and also can add value as nutrients and help us digest them better. They can be used into our baking products, and the cooking quality changes, of course, and we can cook rice to the fluffy, grainy texture and enjoy them with a little experimentation. We should be ready for that, experimenting in small batches to start with, and we should become experts very soon. I think we should wrap up with this. as the proverb says, all good things always return back, and millets are coming back into our kitchens. We better enjoy them, as he rightly said. Don't cook millets for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Go slow and do it with your practicality and enjoy them. Thank you so much, Dwiji. And here, Dr. Gauri Rokam signing off.
Yeah, so just one quick plug for the rest of the session. So please check out the website. It's themillet.org and look for No Millets webinars, and you will find the whole schedule. We put out the slides, and the slides for today's presentation have already been put there. We had one session earlier on Monday, I believe, and we have another 8 sessions coming up. So please join us for those. You can register for the webinars in order to be able to be participating in the on the platform, webinar platform itself, or you can also sign up and get the link to the YouTube live stream. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Dr. Gauri. Amazing to be in conversation with you about this, and I hope all of you got something meaningful out of this session. And I look forward to interacting with you in the future sessions.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye. And thank you for all the volunteers who have been putting up with us and doing all these collating of questions and taking care of technology, all that. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.